Have you seen Arab Spring-like protests erupting in Sudan? I mean, how would they compare with what we saw in Tunisia, Egypt, Libya, and so forth, in Syria?
Yeah, they're smaller in Sudan than they are in the other countries that you just named. I think that the responses that the regime in Khartoum has undertaken have been so draconian that it gives people pause. And another interesting point, most of these countries where the Arab Spring swept through and the huge crowds thronged the center cities of different towns throughout these countries, they had no experience of a democratic sort of eruption, an overthrow of an autocratic regime. Sudan, we've had two of these in 1964 and 1985, where popular uprisings overthrew dictators, and then the same kind of guys, just like we're sort of seeing in Egypt now, the same folks just sort of eventually came back into power. There wasn't much of a change. So I think the Sudanese are they're reluctant to go in the streets at the level that the folks in Egypt and Tunisia and Syria have until they see what the alternative is. They want to hear from those rebel groups what is precisely your agenda for the future. They want to hear from the protesters, especially the youth that are leading the protest movement in Khartoum and other cities in Sudan. What is it that you see as the different future? Because we don't want to go out and have many of us shot and killed and beaten and arrested and tortured in order to make change for nothing really to change. So I think that's where the reluctance has been. And so there's been a lot of work being done amongst the rebel groups and amongst the internal unarmed opposition within Sudan to try to begin to articulate a vision of what an alternative government would look like in the future. It's an interesting dynamic moment in Sudan now. It's very unpredictable. This regime, no government lasts forever, and this regime has been in power for a long time. It's a very strong one. They've got a massive security apparatus to keep it in power, but no one wants him in there anymore. And so that's beginning to fray, and there are divisions within the ruling party, but still the opposition hasn't been able to pull together to the extent that it inspires people to say, you know what, I believe in those guys, so let's go ahead and risk our lives by the hundreds of thousands as they did in other countries. I'm going to risk my life in order to see change from my country.